Hello everyone and a very warm welcome to you. My name is Darragh Ryder and I'm the CEO of AHEAD here in Ireland. AHEAD is an Irish non-profit focused on creating inclusive environments in education and employment for people with disabilities. And I'm your guest host for today's webinar, the Word2EPUB extended tutorial, accessible EPUB in seconds. In a previous webinar titled Create EPUB Publications from Word with a simple tool that anyone can use, we learned about why DAISY developed the Word2EPUB tool, how to download and install it, and there were some quick demonstrations on producing EPUB titles. If you missed it, then the video, transcript, and slide deck are available on the website. Today's session is a follow-on from that webinar, so if you feel that today is a little advanced for you, then it's a good idea to jump back into the recording of that previous webinar when you get a chance. In this session, we get into very practical specifics of using the Word2EPUB tool. We'll revisit how to create accessible EPUBs from your Word documents using the simple one-click solution. But then our panel of experts will take a deeper dive into some of the more advanced features, including custom styling, page numbering, multiple language support, customizing document metadata, and much more. Once we are finished the presentations and demonstrations, we'll try to pick up any questions we haven't got to in the remaining time. But at this point, I'm going to get us started and hand over to our panelists to introduce themselves. Take it away, folks.
Hello, everyone. My name is Nancy Zhang, and I'm from PRCVI, the Provincial Resource Center for the Visually Impaired, Vancouver, Canada. PRCVI is a program funded by the Ministry of Education of British Columbia, and we produce digital and alternate format materials for K-12 students with print of perceptual disabilities. I am the production facilitator and involved in the development of new formats. Today, I'm very happy to share with you some uses of this wonderful tool from the perspective of a user. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. I'm Joseph Polizotto. I'm the Alternative Media Supervisor at UC Berkeley. And at UC Berkeley, we have about 450 students who are approved for alternative media as an accommodation. I manage a team of 8 specialists who convert materials into alternative formats for these students. And we have been using the Word2EPUB tool in our EPUB workflow. And I'm excited to share with you some of the techniques that we use at UC Berkeley with this tool.
And hello, everyone. My name is Richard Orme. I work at the DAISY Consortium, and I work out of Warwick, right in the middle of England. You'll often hear my voice hosting these webinars, but today I'm grateful for Darragh stepping in. I'm one of the team, the international team, in fact, responsible for developing this tool. Okay, so let's move on, and we'll start by having a look at the overview of what we're going to cover in today's session. And as Darragh mentioned, please keep your questions coming. So we'll start with a quick demonstration of using Word2EPUB in its simplest way, just using point and shoot. Then we'll go through a number of the advanced features, and in fact, that's where we'll spend most of our time in this session. And then we'll have a look at how you can set preferences, get help on using the tool, get updates, and then if we have any questions and answers, then we'll cover those at the end. So just before we do the point and shoot, let's just cover the basics so we're all on the same page. So Word2EPUB is a tool, a piece of software that is free to download and use. You start with your accessible structured Word document. So that's what you need, and you work in Word to create your document, or you work with a document you've created before. But that document does need to be structured and accessible. This tool won't resolve those issues. It'll convert to a different format. But with the tool, you can create EPUBs, which can then be used on any platform in any EPUB reading app. But for the moment, the tool is Windows only. It has been localized into many different languages, and you can download it from daisy.org/Word2EPUB. Those 3 words all joined together. And as Darragh mentioned, this is the extended tutorial. So if you want to learn the basics, there's that previous webinar, but after the quick demo, we'll be kind of diving into some of the more advanced details. So here then, we're going to start with our first point and shoot demo. So I'm going to drop down to my desktop, and I'm going to open up a Word document. I'm going to open this one called Going the Extra Mile, and this is an academic paper from a university professor. How do I create an EPUB from this? Up on the ribbon, I have this button here which says WordToEPUB. I just click on that. It starts a dialog, and in this simple dialog, I can modify the file name or where it's going to be saved, but I'm just going to click OK. This is one way of using the tool. I can also find the document, right-click on it, and do convert with WordToEPUB there if I want. I can also just run the tool from my desktop and browse for the file if that's the way I want to do it. So let's pop back then to the conversion if I get to the right window. Oh, it's not appearing. Here we are. The conversion has completed, and I've got three options: to view the EPUB, to open the folder which it's in, or just to close this. So remember, what I've done so far is click on the ribbon, click on OK. Now if I click on View EPUB, it'll open my currently set EPUB reader, and here it is ready for me to read. I'll just jump into that. Here's my EPUB. I've got all the kind of features I would expect, such as a detailed table of contents, and I can do the sorts of things you might want to, such as changing the colors, fonts, have read aloud, and all those sorts of things. And there's the EPUB that was created in that. So that is the point and shoot demo. Really straightforward, and we could end the webinar here, but we're going to go into some of the more advanced features. Here we go. So we're going to cover the accessibility checker and the headings report. We're going to look at metadata and word properties. We're going to have a look at cover images and how you can include those in your EPUB, how you mark up languages, the table of contents, the splitting level of the document within your EPUB, Stylesheets, and Pagination. So that's our menu of the things we're going to cover in the advanced features. So the first thing is that this isn't a webinar on how to create accessible Word documents, but I hope I've got the message across that if you follow the principles of creating an accessible Word document and use the simple mode, you can end up with a great EPUB. So that means using headings, lists, proper tables, so not pictures of tables, but you use the Word feature to include a table. You have alt text for images. You can use captions for images and tables, and these are included correctly. If you correctly enter hyperlinks, use the Word feature for footnotes and endnotes, these will all be supported in the EPUB. But in Word, I just want to note a couple of things that are useful to know about before we get into the tool itself. The first is that if we go back into that document and find an image, I can set, of course, the alt text on this image, and this is what I have set here. But if you have images that are decorative or adequately described in the surrounding text, it may be appropriate not to include alt text. So you can use the checkbox, which is mark as decorative. So far, so obvious, but not every version of Word has this feature. And I know that particularly in education organizations and maybe in some NGOs, they don't have the latest versions of Microsoft Office. So what do you do if you don't have that checkbox there? Well, what you would do is you would put the alt text using the word decorative, or indeed the equivalent in your language, and the WordToEPUB tool would then mark up that image as decorative. The other thing I mentioned was that headings, and headings are so important because they are the way that the navigation within the EPUB is derived. Of course, I can see how the headings are set in my tool by going to View, Navigation pane, and here I have the headings that are within this EPUB. And the accessibility checker in some versions of Word will also check the heading for you, and they will identify something that is actually a problem in an EPUB in terms of conformance with the accessibility specification, which is where you skip levels of headings. So it's not correct, for example, to skip from heading level 3 to heading level 5 and missing one out there. Now, older versions of the word accessibility checker, they used to identify this as an issue, but the more recent versions, they don't do this. So actually built into the tool, so I'll just run the tool now here, and we'll have our first foray into advanced. In advanced, across this set of tabbed headings, sections at the bottom, there is one called headings, and this is a heading report that's generated by the tool. And as I review through this, in this example, I can see that it's identified a missing heading level 4 between the UK context and the heading, the need for the review. This is something that you would get if you ran the EPUB through the ACE checker, for example. After making EPUB, this feature is inclined to help you spot heading issues before you make the EPUB. And we're only doing this because the accessibility checker in Word, in every instance, is not picking this up. In most cases, our kind of go-to message is use the word accessibility checker to look for issues. I've actually got an extra button here on the screen, which is to open the heading report in a browser. That's because this heading report here, if you've got a really long document, it can be, not so nice to review that within this little window here. So what that does is it opens that heading report in a full browser, and it makes it easier to identify any heading issues in your EPUB. So these are a couple of things that we wanted to identify as being useful as part of the first foray into this. So that's the headings report. Now we're going to talk about editing metadata, and I'll hand over to Joseph to handle this topic.
Great, thanks, Richard. So just a quick review of some important information about EPUBs. So in EPUBs, there is a section called the metadata section. This is actually in the package document. The metadata in an EPUB is essentially the basic information about the publication. So what the title of the publication is, who created it, when, who has the rights of the publication, etc. And this tool, the Word2EPUB tool, makes it really easy to add or edit metadata for the EPUB that you're creating. So as you can see, you can edit the publisher, the ISBN number, the source, and in addition to an EPUB, metadata, for an accessible metadata, for accessibility purposes, it's really important that the metadata also include information about the accessibility features in the EPUB, and it's great that the Word2EPUB tool also will export important information about that. So as you can see at the very bottom of this, of the metadata tab, you'll see an accessibility summary, which informs the user, the reader of the EPUB, about what accessibility features are there. If you are likely to generate the EPUB a few times, another way to make sure that the EPUB metadata are correct would be to edit the Word document properties in Microsoft Word, as this information is also picked up by the tool. And as we can see now, in Microsoft Word, if you go to the File menu, Info, and then select Properties, you can edit in the Properties menu the Microsoft Word properties about the document, and these again are picked up by the tool. So moving on to the next tab in the Advanced menu of Word2EPUB, the cover image. So the cover image in an EPUB is usually used for display in a library view of an EPUB reader or as a thumbnail in a catalog view. And the Word2EPUB tool provides users with a number of ways to select a cover image. So by default, a thumbnail of the first page of your Word document is generated by the tool, but you may also choose to select an image on your local device, or you may select an image from within the Word document. So on the left-hand side, we see an image from the Word document, and next to the radio button, image from a Word document, you'll see those arrows which allow you to pan through the images that are located in the Word documents. So you can select from one of those. You also see that you can edit the alternative text for this cover image down below. On the right-hand side, we see what is typical in our use case, where we have a standard where we use the same cover image for all the files that we're producing for our students. We've selected our UC Berkeley logo as our cover image, and so I've selected that from a desktop. And if you are going to be using the same cover image for all the files that you're working on, like we are, this is another thing that this is something that you can set in the preferences menu, which we'll see a bit later, to be the default cover image. So now we're going to move on to languages and talk about that advanced feature of WordToEPUB. So when you select the next tab of EPUB options, WordToEPUB does select automatically what the base language is in the document. And this is very important for accessibility purposes, as the text-to-speech output for assistive technologies or the Braille translation table that's used by a refreshable Braille display needs to know what the base language is for the entire document. So you can either allow the WordToEPUB tool to select automatically the base language, or you can select from the language drop-down menu what the base language is. And another really important feature when it comes to language accessibility is the ability for language switching to occur. So when a document contains more than one language, it's important, again, that the text-to-speech technology or assistive technology or refreshable Braille display that other language, that language that is now different from the base language, say, of the document, that the technology will switch to speak that language with the correct voice. So now Richard's going to show us a demonstration of how this works using Read Aloud feature in a popular EPUB reader.
So I'm about to run a video that shows Read Aloud in the Thorium reader, which is available on Windows, on Mac, and on Linux. The base language of this document is French, but there's also some Spanish text in here, which has been automatically detected by Word, and then the WordToEPUB tool has marked up the contents within EPUB. And you'll hear the voice change after about 20 seconds from the French to the Spanish.
Retourner. C'est ce que je ne comprendrai jamais. Elle est retournée à cet homme. Monsieur Laruelle revint à la table où il se versa un verre d'eau minérale de Teuacan qu'il but. Il dit:
Salud y pesetas. Y tiempo para gastarlas, replicó pensivement son ami.
Monsieur Laruelle observa le docteur.
So this would work if we're using the Read Aloud in Thorium, or if we were using a screen reader like JAWS or NVDA, it would switch languages. Now, the highly observant amongst you may have spotted that after it read the text, "Y tiempo para," oh dear, I really shouldn't have started this, the Spanish text, the rest of that line is actually written in French, but it used the Spanish voice. So I left this error in here so that we can show how you do the markup within the Word document. So this is from a book called Au-dessus du volcano, Under the Volcano. And if in Word I click the cursor onto a line of text, at the bottom here it shows me the current proofing language. That's being detected as French, France. And if I move to the next line, it tells me that's Spanish, very clever, and this next line is Spanish too. Now here's the French text here, répliqua pensivement son ami, and it's actually saying this is Spanish. And we can see that this is wrong because actually it's got the spelling error indicator under these words, whereas these are spelt correctly. It's thinking it's Spanish, which is why it's looking to see this as a spelling mistake. So I'm going to this text now, and I'm clicking where it says Spanish, and I will change this to French, France, and the spelling error stuff goes. And if we were now to generate this EPUB again, it would mark this text as French text, and it would be spoken with the correct voice.
Retourner.
Okay, so that's how we do the markup of the language. Let's talk now about the table of contents. And the heading structure, as I mentioned earlier, that is used to generate the table of contents within the EPUB. And for those who want to know the detail, the title style, if you have a title in there, that paragraph is marked the same as an heading level 1. Now, in most reading apps, whether you're using Thorium or you're using VitalSource Bookshelf or something like Google Books or Apple Books, in most reading apps, the best experience for navigating through the structure of your title is to use the app's table of contents feature. But it's also possible to include the table of contents in line within the EPUB. And if that's the preference for your readers or that's your house style, then the WordToEPUB tool allows you to include the table of contents in line. Also, you can customize the title of the table of contents. So maybe you have a different style or it's different in your language. And your Word document may contain a table of contents generated by Word already. Now, typically, you want to delete this because that can include all sorts of anomalies and artifacts of the Word document and the Word process. Usually, it's best just to take that out of the equation, and then the table of contents using the UI of the reading app or the new generated one is the better thing to include. Now we're going to talk about style sheets, and I'll hand back to Joseph.
Style sheets refer to the visual presentation of the EPUB. So in an EPUB being based on HTML, EPUBs can have their own custom style sheet or cascading style sheet or CSS file applied to them. And the visual presentation refers to how large the fonts are, what the color of the fonts is, etc. And the WordToEPUB tool has ships with some style sheets for you to experiment with. So for instance, if some of your students have tried out your EPUB and find that maybe the text is a little too small or the font isn't as readable, you can choose from among the various CSS files that are in the drop-down menu that we see in the screenshot and try that with one of the EPUB readers that your student is using. And now Nancy is going to explain a little bit more about how to adjust the style sheet in an EPUB that you've made.
Thanks. So yes, the style sheets included in the WordToEPUB tool are very comprehensive. Basically, you can use any one to generate an EPUB with desired styles and layout and or appearance. However, if there's anything in the document for which you would want to have a specific look or appearance, you can easily make changes to the style sheet and make a style sheet of your own. So this is a EPUB file converted using the low vision CSS style sheet, and it's opened in the program Sigil. So we can see in this section, table of contents and page list, we can see all these numbers here before each item in the list, in the nav file. So you see the number before the page list, 1, 2, 3, 5, does not correspond to the real page list. So at PRCVI, it is desired that these numbers, or we call markers before the list, would not exist. And so we can make changes. I'll show you in a minute. And something else I want to make changes about is this pretty big gap between print page number label and the print chapter number line. So in order to make these changes, I can go to the style sheet. I'll double click the name of the style sheet to have it open in the file pane. So to change the spacing between the two lines, I can change, the big spacing is here due to the top margin setting of the heading 1 elements. So I can change it here. So you can see for all these heading levels, so the margin top is 2 EM. So if I want to make it the spacing smaller, I can change the number 2, say let's change it to 1. You can see the change immediately. So it changes smaller. And also I can change it to 0. So This is very easy to change the appearance of the content of the EPUB. And another change I want to make is this one. I want to remove the number, the list, before the list. So I can add a rule set, maybe we can call, to the style sheet. At the very end, so I can add this rule set here, which says for all the lists in the nav file, we don't want to have any markers before the list. So the markers here is none. So you can see as soon as this is added, so the numbers is gone from the list. So you can do this every time you convert a file, but that would be time consuming and repetitive. What you can do is you can right click the name of the file and save it to your desktop. Let's say I'll save it as webinar and to my desktop. And then I will navigate to the CSS folder on the C drive. I go to Program Files x86 and then DAISY and then WordToEPUB and CSS. So this is the folder where all the style sheets of WordToEPUB2 are stored. So I can save, this is the saved file just now. I can drag this file into this folder. Oh, sorry, it takes longer. Okay, so now it is here. So the next time when you try to convert a file, say you can, yes, you can see the saved file here in the drop-down for CSS file. And also, if you want to use this style sheet for most and all your converted files, you can make this style sheet as a default style sheet by going to Preferences here, and then also select it in the drop-down box for CSS file. And then it will become your default style sheet, which will be very convenient to use. And so that's it for the customizing style sheet. Thanks.
Thanks, Nancy and Richard. I've got a nice question coming in here, and maybe that's to point towards the two of you. But Matthew here asks a question about styles. He's saying Word, of course, supports styles, but they're not carried over to the EPUBs generated by WordToEPUB. So he's just wondering, is there any consideration given to allowing users to simply use the styles in Word document, in other words, to allow those styles to be carried over into the EPUB? And also, I suppose I'm going to add an addendum to that question. Is there any way of providing any control from Word, from the Word end on what ends up in EPUB in terms of the visual style?
So what is carried over typically are the semantics. So the heading level, whether something is a block quote, that kind of thing. And then you would use the CSS or the features of your reading system to adjust how that looks. So I guess that's maybe the downside, but the big upside of EPUB readers is that they give you control, the user, to personalize how your EPUB is shown. Because of course you could be looking at an EPUB on a phone with a small screen or on a computer with a big screen. So in most cases, Matthew is correct. The details of how you've specifically set up the visual presentation in Word does not come over to the EPUB. But if you use the semantics, you can match that in some way by doing some of the adjustments that Nancy was showing us how to do.
I'd like to just add something.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so regarding the font formatting, so with character styles, so WordToEPUB supports a lot of the original font formatting that's in your Word document. So if you have bold, italics, underline, even highlighted text, all of that will go right through to the EPUB. It's more fancy font formatting like dashed underline or double underline, things like this that would require a little bit more editing in the EPUB.
Richard, because I think the one question follow-up here is actually in relation to the options for CSS shown in the drop-down menu. So he's wondering, Hans is wondering, what are the effects of the different options that you can choose shown in the CSS menu? It seems hard to choose since the naming of the options are sometimes a little bit cryptic. So you can see there the low vision, the blitz light.
Yeah. If the question is about which of those, what do those different CSS files offer, Hans is not, he's not the first person to point out that they're a bit kind of difficult to determine those. So the language currently is there for you to be able to experiment with, but it's in our issue tracker to try and be more helpful explaining why you might choose certain CSS versions over others. So let me just maybe explain a couple of them. So one of them is the low vision CSS, which is actually shown on this screenshot. Here what we've done is we've taken a nice lightweight CSS, and then what we've done is embedded a really nice font as part of this, or rather this means that a font called Atkinson Hyperlegible is embedded within the EPUB, and this is optimized for people with low vision. So that's a low vision option, but this isn't explained anywhere kind of directly on this screen. So yes, it's cryptic. There's another one here which is called RTL Ready, and this assists in the production of EPUBs that are with Arabic text or other right to left text. So that means that those should display correctly. So in a sense, my answer to that is yes, there's work to do to explain these rather cryptic CSS options. Joseph, you were going to say a little, I think, about what you do in respect of style sheets at UC Berkeley.
Yeah, so we have a standard style sheet that we've developed that is designed to work with a number of low vision students, and we use that for our HTML production workflow and also in our EPUB production workflow. So our style sheet adjusts things like our heading structure, gives more contrast for the header row in a table, whether for columns or for rows. It also provides a green background for any mathematical content that's in the document, so it's easier for our specialists to see that and edit it. We also have like a little, we have a different color background for secondary text markup and for footnote text, so it's easier to distinguish the main body of the text from secondary text content. So we've devised our own style sheet and we continually update it. And when I meet with the students who are approved for alt media to talk about our EPUB offerings, we share with them our sample EPUBs and go over with them how it's going to look in a reading system and determine with the student what would be optimal for their needs. And in some cases, the style sheet isn't as important to adjust for some students as it is the reading system, because the reading system also allows the students to change things like the line spacing and character spacing, and sometimes these are the difference for students with visual difficulties to perceive the text more easily.
Great, so we've got quite a lot of more content to go through, so let's pick up the pace slightly. This is quite a quick pane of the advanced settings to cover, because we've covered most of it already in terms of language and the table of contents options and the style sheet. So a couple of other options that are on this sheet are the split documents at heading level. Now, a Word document is one great long Word document all in one piece, but if you're actually taking a long book maybe that's been produced as an EPUB and reading that on a device with lower power, such as an inexpensive smartphone or an older computer, one of the features of EPUB is to split the title up into chunks, so it's kind of invisible to the user, but it just means that it's having to load just small pieces of text and the associated images and other things at one piece. So WordToEPUB takes care of that, and by default it splits the document at heading level 1. So if your, let's call them chapters, were all marked as a heading level 1, then these would each be separate files within the EPUB, and as you move from chapter to chapter, kind of invisibly to the user, it would actually be loading a new XHTML file. But you could have a file that's come to you from somewhere else that has maybe the title as heading level 1 and the chapter headings as level 2. So this just gives you that opportunity to be able to split at a lower level if you wanted to. In discussion with Joseph and with Nancy, this isn't an option I think that you've said that you've needed to use, maybe because you're originating the content always yourselves. Is that right?
That's correct.
So, probably still noted, yeah.
That's correct, yes.
And then the last option on this screen is convert WMF, EMF, PDF images to PNG. Lots of acronyms in there. A Word document can include images that have come from all sorts of different places. And as we've had people reporting that they've had some issues with the EPUBs they've generated, it's been because they've included images that have come in using image formats that are not supported within the EPUB standard and with the EPUB reading systems, such as WMF and PDF images within an EPUB. So the tool will convert, as part of the process, these into a PNG, and there's the option to turn that off if you find that's not relevant to you, and you might get some performance gain for that. But by default, that's switched on, because by default, our option is to ship the tool with it, so it really is point and shoot for a professor or a self-publishing author. They should be able to just use it and be confident they're going to get an EPUB. So by default, that setting is on. So now we're going to talk about pagination.
Yeah, so one of the absolutely essential aspects of an accessible EPUB is that it has correct page navigation, and the WordToEPUB tool makes this very easy and gives users a lot of versatile options in how you create the page navigation in your EPUB. So for instance, pages in an EPUB or in a Word document can be marked up in different ways. So WordToEPUB supports page numbers that are added to the headers and footers region in a Word document. Page numbers can also be marked up as heading 6 style in Word, which is actually what we do at UC Berkeley. Page numbers can also be marked as a page number style or DAISY style in Word. And they can also be included on their own lines with the text print page and then the number. In all of these ways, you can export your Word document to EPUB with the WordToEPUB tool and have a fully navigable page navigation experience with your EPUB. And in some cases, if there is no page numbers in a Word document that you're converting, you can also select that, no page numbers. And now Nancy's going to explain how at PRCVI they handle pagination in Word documents.
The page number is marked up in such a way that it is included in the document, and the Word print page is the number is preceded by the Word print page, and it's inserted at the very top of each page, as you can see on the slide, the screenshot. Yes, and
Nancy,
so
you don't need to start again, but you've just gone a little quiet.
Okay, sorry.
Yeah.
Yes, so as you can see on the screenshot here, print page number 5 is the first thing on the page and followed by the content of the page. So we use print in the page number label because we want to make it clear this is the page number on the print, in contrast with the page numbers on the program. As we know, almost all program has its own page numbers. Microsoft Word, Adobe, Kurzweil, they all have their own page numbers. And this system of marking up the page number is used for easy navigation and better accessibility. So as for example, in the classroom, the teacher might want to want the students to go to a certain page, and the students can use the search tool to search print page 5, and then they navigate to the page. And also the page number appearing at the very top of the page, so it make it easy for it to be announced at the very first thing for the screen reader user and the visual user as well. And so this system of marking up the page number works perfect for all formats, including EPUB. But it presents some challenge when coming to splitting up documents. As we mentioned just now, we split up document at a certain heading level, and here at PRCVI, we split up at heading level 1. And so the splitting point should be chapter 1, summer surprise. And so this would be the first thing in the document, leaving the print page number at the very end of the previous file. This is kind of frustrating. And so we used to have to manually move the print page number label to its right location, or we have to split up the document manually. But now, thanks to Mr. Richard Orme, who has designed and incorporated a feature or workaround into the tool to help resolve this challenge. So what we do now, if you can go next slide, yes. So what we do now is just we move the print page number tag to the very beginning of the line of the chapter number with the same heading style, heading 1. This is all we need to do in the Word document. And then the tool will do the magic and do the rest for us. And the document will be split up with the right location of the chapter, the right location with chapter number and title just below print page number. So thank you, Richard, for this wonderful tool. Okay, that's it.
Well, thank you for your kind words. So we're going to talk through some of the...
Richard, if it's okay, I might just quickly ask. So Barb is asking, will it ever be available for Macs, the tool?
So the question comes up a lot. We know this is really important. It is a desire that a future version of the tool will work on Mac. Absolutely. We're not ignoring it. We're probably looking to see for one of our other internal tools, Pipeline and Save as DAISY, for that to be updated, and then we'll be able to incorporate that, and then we've got something we can ship on the Mac. So it's definitely not coming this year. That's probably the safest thing I can say, but we hear you. Okay, so we're moving to preferences. The tool, as I think Nancy indicated, Nancy, you explained how having changed a style sheet, you're able to set that as your default style sheet. The preferences is the place where you're able to put in some default conversion options, such as whether the table of content is included and the language detection and these sorts of things. Also the default pagination method, because if you're in a unit and you always use the same technique, you don't want to have to go and change that every time. It also has the user interface options where you can change things like the UI language, whether you automatically start in advanced mode, whether you have verbose messages and these sorts of things. You can remove and add in the word add-in, which is just that little button that goes on the ribbon there. And you can use it as a way also to check manually for updates. So that's the preferences. So it's got that, you can explore that area. For getting help, there is a help button in that, both the simple and the advanced pane that comes up. When you select that option, you get a new dialog which has just the basic explainer of the different ways you can use the tool. There's also a button for help documents, and what this does, it opens the folder with the help documents for the language you have selected. So if you're using the German, the Danish, the Italian, the French, the Portuguese, for which we have manuals written, then those are just presented to you and you read those documents in Word. And typically at the moment, there is a document actually to help you with creating accessible Word documents, which is used for whatever the purpose is you have for your Word documents. Then you have a getting started with WordToEPUB, and you have an advanced use of WordToEPUB too. So do go and have a look at those documents if you have questions. There's also access here to the latest release notes. You can send us feedback, questions, or requests directly with a button on this tool that will generate an email for us. And there's a little counter in there too, which tells you about the number of pages and files that you've created to EPUB, just as something that might be useful or interesting to you. And then getting updates. So the tool is updated. We don't have a kind of regular update cadence. It's about quarterly, but the tool, if you have the option for check updates automatically, if you have that set, when you start the tool, it will check to see whether or not there is an update available. Or you can come to this section of WordToEPUB preferences, go to updates and check for updates now, and it'll let you know that you're using the latest version of the tool or if there is a new one available. If there's a new version available, it's just a couple of clicks and the tool will update itself. Obviously, an internet connection is needed for that. So for downloads, as I mentioned before, that the information about the tool and the place you can download it from is daisy.org/WordToEPUB. And you can also email us at WordToEPUB, that's the word and then TOEPUB @daisy.org. And Nancy, you were using the sigil editor to modify the style sheet.
Yes.
And maybe you do a couple of other things in the EPUB after you've generated it as well. So there's a note here that you can download the sigil editor, which is available for Mac and Windows, I believe, from sigil-ebook.com. Okay, so it's always hard to judge when you know you have an hour, how long it's going to take to go through things. And so what we didn't want to do is cram in too much and not either rush it or not allow us chance to answer questions as we go along. So there are some things that we didn't cover, which if there is interest in this, we can cover in a webinar later this year, or we can take some questions as we come towards the end of this session. So in the latest version, which is version 1.03, there is what we've called the Quality Assurance Wizard. This, after you've generated your EPUB, you have the option to continue within the tool to proceed with the Quality Assurance Wizard. And this allows you to launch, first of all, the tool EPUB Checker. And EPUB Checker will check the validity of the EPUB that's just been generated to make sure that it is conformant to the EPUB standard. It is a valid EPUB. If you move to the next step, then you can run ACE. And ACE stands for Accessibility Checker for EPUB. And if you click a button there, it'll launch the ACE app. This will help you in checking your EPUB that's just been generated to be that it is conformance with the accessibility conformance specification for EPUB. And then the third step in this tool will be that it can launch the Thorium reader, which is actually the reading system, one of the reading systems I just demonstrated. And there's some guidance within the Quality Assurance Wizard about the sorts of things you might want to look for to make sure you're happy with the EPUB that's been generated. So this, Nancy, would be where you might spot things like numbered items in a page list if you've made that out in the open, or you're not happy with maybe the spacing of some things. So it's just a way to give you a workflow for creating EPUB that makes it super easy. The very last step just allows you to open the folder where you've just generated your EPUB in case your last step is to maybe upload it to a server or copy it to a certain place or do something different with it. So this is something I can explain like I just did, but to actually walk through that, we would want to also demonstrate the tools too. So we didn't feel we had time to cover that. We had a question I see in the Q&A on math. So the answer to the question, maybe the question got answered already in text, but the math that has been included using the equation editor, that is converted into MathML. which then if you're using, say, NVDA or JAWS, you can have a great experience navigating your math expressions with that. Joseph or Nancy, is this something that you're using, math in the EPUB generated through WordToEPUB?
We have not been producing math files using this tool.
Okay. What about you, Joseph?
Yeah, so our students who've received EPUBs so far have not had math content in the documents they've converted, but we've done a number of tests, and we have in our workflow the potential to produce math using the steps of creating the Word document with math type equations and then converting those equations into Microsoft Word equations using the GrindEQ Microsoft math type to Microsoft Word equation utility. So there may be another webinar in which we cover. There will be another webinar in which we cover that, and we'd be glad to go into more depth about that.
Great. And then I reference on this bullet point converting from LaTeX. So maybe if you have higher math type content, the professors are writing their worksheets and papers and maybe even chapters of their books in LaTeX. Then the tool, there is a workflow for the tool to be able to take a LaTeX file and create that into an EPUB that has the MathML in there too. So that's a subject of another longer discussion. Also, the tool supports things like citations, asides, and some other features which we just didn't feel we had time to squeeze in, but should be mentioned in the advanced manual.
Brian asks, can it handle a mix of L to R and R to L languages, like a mix of English and Arabic documents? So I think he's talking about documents with script in them.
So we have done some testing with mixed Arabic and English language text, but to be honest, I think this needs more testing. So Brian, if you're interested in that, we can hook up and do more work on that. But the tool is being used to create Arabic content in some countries, but I'd love to hear how people are getting on and to know what issues there might be. So it's not a firm yes on that one.
Okay, so we're coming to the end of our session, and a big thank you to Nancy, to Joseph, and to Richard for sharing their knowledge and experience with us today, and to Dave, who provided tech support for the session there in the background. I want to highlight before we go that since the beginning of April, the DAISY Consortium has been running these webinars weekly on the topic of accessible publishing and reading. In August, DAISY is going to give you a bit of a well-earned break from this schedule so you can take a breather, but the videos and slide decks for all the webinars so far are available on the DAISY website, and the one today will also be there. So if you're missing your weekly Wednesday fix from DAISY, do head there to check out the back catalogue. It really is a treasure trove of resources. The team already has some exciting webinars ready for the return of regular webinars in September. If you'd like to suggest a subject for those webinars, or indeed put yourself forward as a webinar presenter, then please email the team at webinars@daisy.org. And I hope you'll join us all again in September when we resume. In the meantime, thank you for your time, stay safe and well, and have a wonderful remainder of the summer. Goodbye.